everyone. Today we're looking at another challenge in the early church. About that time, while the number of disciples continued to increase, a complaint arose. Greek-speaking disciples accused the Aramaic-speaking disciples because their widows were being overlooked in the daily food service. The 12 called a meeting of all the disciples and said, "It isn't right for us to set aside proclamation of God's word in order to serve tables. Brothers and sisters, carefully choose 7 well-respected men from among you. They must be well-respected and endowed with the Spirit with exceptional wisdom. We'll put them in charge of this concern. As for us, we'll devote ourselves to prayer and the service of proclaiming the word." So at this point in the story of the early church, all disciples of Christ are still Jewish, right? They're Jewish Christians. And yet, even in that, there are cultural differences that create problems for this church in Jerusalem. And so, there's a lot of history behind it we won't get into, but you've got the Aramaic-speaking or Hebrew-speaking Jews who probably feel like they're, the real Jews, right? Because they're speaking the same language of the Old Testament. And you also have these Greek-speaking Hellenized Jews who are a little more influenced by Greek culture, or maybe they moved to Jerusalem from other places. And so, however it had gone before, we're seeing the way that these differences and how they thought about one another are coming out in the way that certain widows are being treated. It's always complicated, right? Having all things in common, which has been the way the community is described so far, well, it's not always easy. And even when we say, well, all people are equal, it's hard to actually be consistent when it comes to practice. But I think we really see some wise leadership from the apostles here. They both take it seriously and they delegate to the appropriate people. Right? The 12, they're all Aramaic speaking, so they would be in one of those groups, and yet they listen to the other cultural group and take seriously their complaint and don't brush it off. And then to address this, they choose leaders from that group. We didn't read it, but if you go and look at the names of the 7 they choose, those are all Greek names, which implies that they were part of this Greek-speaking group. Right, so they don't say, "Oh, well, that's just a Greek problem. You all take care of that." They're saying, we don't want to solve problems for another group and not include people from that group, which is a pretty good lesson even today as we're dealing with some of our differences. What do we do when there are disputes and complaints? Do we refuse to delegate because even though we're already overworked? Do we assume that we just know how to fix it even when we're not actually involved? I think good advice here is do what is yours to do, right? And to ask that the Spirit would show us what is actually ours to do and what is not, and show us how that can best be done through the power of the Spirit.